Now, one of the things we have to talk about when we talk about the feed grain and feed protein complex is African swine fever. At last count, there's been 15 separate outbreaks of African swine fever in China, spread out over well over 1,000 miles. One of the problems early on, before China got a hold of it, and you can really debate that whether they really even have a hold of it, but before the problem really became known, is apparently, according to reports, there were some hogs with the disease that were transported toward slaughter plants. Because of China's environmental regulations and other zoning issues, hog production has largely been pushed to the northeastern areas of the country where the feed grains are produced and where population centers are smaller, as a general rule. However, the Chinese people really like their fresh pork, and so the slaughter plants are in the southern, highly populated areas. So these hogs have to be transported a long ways, 1,500, 1,600 miles, depending on where they're located. So apparently there were some hogs that were being transported down, and when you're transported that far, you periodically have to wash your trucks down, spreading this highly contagious disease. So now we've got disease breaking out in various parts of the major producing areas of China. China has 55% of the world's hogs, at least it did before this outbreak. Pork is the #1 driver of food inflation in China, and food inflation is the top driver of social unrest in most countries. So this is a real concern for the Chinese government. How bad might this end up being? As I said, as far as the hog diseases, this is about as bad as it gets, highly contagious. The only known control is to cull the herds. Now, China has put a ban on transporting hogs, which means they can't get their hogs from production areas down to the slaughter plant. So we've seen pork prices really surge in China. Chinese officials are trying to rapidly move to change zoning regulations to allow production in these southern areas near the slaughter plants. But that's assuming they can actually get some hogs into that area to produce and get the herd in that area built up. That takes time. It also assumes that they can keep the disease out of those herds. And I don't have a lot of confidence in that, and I think there's a lot of people in the same camp. As such, I look for this to potentially be the top story for 2019. Demand destruction for soy protein in China, a definite possibility. Some corn demand loss. Now China raised their corn production, or excuse me, corn consumption estimate this morning while lowering their soy protein, but that was totally pretty much unrelated to African swine fever. They don't want to acknowledge that's that bad. They were just simply trying to send some propaganda our way 55 days before the midterm elections and how bad it's going to be for soybean farmers here. But even though corn will probably lose some demand, ethanol demand is really ramping up. And so that should certainly, and here again, it's another negative for soy protein demand, just as we've seen in this country. But that should help offset some of the lost corn feed demand. But here again, potential implications for pork, poultry, beef exports could be significant. If China has to really ramp up their imports of pork and perhaps poultry, this disease is not a threat to humans, but the consumer doesn't always believe the Chinese government when they say that, so there may be some shift toward poultry and toward fish. So those may have shortages in encouraging more importation of those food products as well. And so even though they don't want to buy from the United States, they'll be shuffling the business around, and other countries they do import from will get some of their business. So it does look good. Here again, 2019, we may dynamically change the global protein story, both from a meat and feed protein standpoint.